Are you getting enough iron in your diet? Well, China recently announced to the world that 1/5 of their farmlands are contaminated with heavy metal toxins. These include arsenic, cadmium, and lead. For several months, testing by the Natural News Forensic Food Lab has revealed these toxins in rice protein from China. In Michigan, small family farmers are in danger from a new state law allowing municipalities to ban any species of small animal from their territories, and this could result in common domestic farm animals like chickens or bees being banned around the state. Mike Adams leads naturalnews.com. He's an activist who became a scientist, and he's known to his fans as the Health Ranger. Apart from other activities, his organization conducts laboratory tests on foods searching for contaminants. He's our guest on the show today. He's here to talk to us about the news from China and Michigan and how they both could affect your family. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks, Gary, for having me on. It's a pleasure to join you.
Mike, how serious is the contamination from the toxins in Chinese food products?
Well, it's very serious. This is a global health concern. It affects the health of American consumers who are eating the food, but also the unborn babies of pregnant women who are consuming these products. Now, remember that the Chinese government has now declassified a report that admits 20% of the farms in the country are heavily contaminated with toxic heavy metals like lead, cadmium, arsenic, mercury, and even tungsten. This is huge because the U.S. is importing more and more foods, superfoods, herbs, food powders, powdered grasses, things that are sold in health food stores, things that are sold as organic. We're importing those literally by the container load every single day coming into the U.S. and being consumed by U.S. consumers. And no one, Gary, no one is telling consumers the truth about the heavy metals in their food except just a very small number of organizations. Natural News, Consumer Lab covers it sometimes, and every once in a while, Consumers Reports covers it as well. But that's it. The government's not saying anything.
So let me ask you about the root of the problem. Why are we importing food from China?
Well, yeah, the root of the problem is because you can't stay in business in the United States running a farm due to government regulations, but also Obamacare, healthcare costs. The costs of doing business in the U.S. are so prohibitive that it doesn't make economic sense for a lot of farmers to grow these products in the U.S., even when they can be grown here. So, for example, rice. You can grow rice in Texas, in Louisiana, in California, and it has traditionally been grown in these states for a very long time, over 100 years. But why don't we produce rice protein in America today? It's because it's cheaper to have it produced in China, in Vietnam, in Indonesia, in these Asian nations where it is consistently contaminated with industrial heavy metals. And so the rice protein products that people are buying in America today are contaminated with these toxic substances, some of which have been linked to cancer and lowered IQs and kidney failure and bone disorders and depression and heart disease, all kinds of things. Why aren't we growing this in America? Because of the economic policies of the government.
So you mentioned some of the side effects of these heavy metals. How can people avoid ingesting these things or even know that the rice they're buying is or has been imported from China?
It's very difficult to know. This is a huge, huge issue. Country of origin labeling is not required on nutritional products. For example, medicinal herbs, superfoods, not required. So you don't know where it's coming from. You can't see heavy metals. They're invisible to the human eye. You can't look at a product and see, oh, it's got lead in it. You can't tell. And sometimes the lead levels they seem low. They're only, let's say, half a part per million, but that's high enough to cause damage in a developing human body or a child. So you can't see it. The only way to know is to do your homework. You got to tune into organizations like us, Natural News. We're doing the testing. I run the lab, ICP-MS instrumentation, doing the analysis of these heavy metals. And we publish that information for free. But if you don't, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can you name some of the products that you've tested, some of the brands that you've tested?
Well, sure. If you look at rice protein, almost every brand of rice protein currently sold in the marketplace contains lead, cadmium, and tungsten. That's across the board, from Jarrow formulas to Garden of Life to Warrior Food. to many other brands. I've tested ginkgo supplements, the ginkgo herb that's supposed to enhance your cognitive function. I found ginkgo imported from China to contain as much as 5 parts per million lead, whereas the ginkgo grown in the United States is virtually free of these heavy metals. For example, there's a company called Gaia Herbs. Their ginkgo is totally clean. I went to Whole Foods and bought ginkgo herbs there. Their ginkgo is mostly clean, but if you get it imported from China, it's very polluted. I bought rice in California made by the Lundberg Company. That's a family-run organic rice manufacturer. It tested virtually zero lead, virtually zero cadmium. But rice from China, we know, is typically contaminated. I've seen high cadmium levels in brown rice that's certified organic.
Is there a difference between rice and rice protein?
Yes. Protein is the extracted protein of rice. It's typically a byproduct of when rice is essentially rinsed and soaked and squeezed to make rice syrup, which is a sweetener, a natural sweetener. What's left over after that is a rice protein and some other constituents that have to be removed. But rice protein is really a byproduct of rice syrup manufacturing.
So what about government officials? Should they be responsible for sharing these health risks to the American public?
Well, I think so. Health Canada, for example, has set limits. You can't sell many of the products in Canada that are being sold in the United States today because of the high levels of lead and cadmium and arsenic and mercury. But the FDA has no regulatory limit. And even worse, Gary, the USDA has no limit on the levels of these metals that can be found in certified organic products. So you can be at Whole Foods, for example, buying a certified organic product, and in your mind as a consumer, you're thinking, oh, this is really clean. This is organic. It's the best of the best, right? Well, sometimes it's contaminated with heavy metals, and certified organic doesn't mean that it doesn't have heavy metals. In fact, the highest levels that we've found have been in organic products. And I'm not attacking organics. I'm a big supporter of organics, but it doesn't test for heavy metals, and organic foods can be grown on farms that are heavily contaminated with industrial heavy metals and still be certified organic. That's a fact that a lot of people don't know.
To domestic homesteaders in Michigan where species have been banned, Mike, how do these two stories connect?
Well, there's an assault on food freedom or the freedom to farm in America. Remember, America is a country that was really founded on farming and homesteading, and go out west and claim your acres and grow some food and survive and have a family. Well, that whole idea is under attack today by government officials, in this case in the state of Michigan. This is the same state whose DNR, Department of Natural Resources, previously had ordered a small farmer to shoot his own pigs based on racial discrimination. They said that his pigs weren't the right race of pigs and that he had to kill them all. And he fought that, and that's some of that battle is still going on. But now, more recently, the state of Michigan has passed a law, an ordinance, in essence, that would allow local cities and towns to ban backyard farming, to criminalize people who have chickens or goats or even honeybees in their own backyards if it's within, I think it's 500 feet of some other house. Now, what's
the driving force behind people being self-sufficient, or against people that want to be self-sufficient?
Well, it's a monopolization tactic for the centralization of the food industry. In the case of the farmer that was ordered to shoot his pigs, there was a lot of pressure from the pork industry that didn't want backyard farmers to be able to compete with centralized big pork factories, essentially. And the same thing is going on with chickens and chicken eggs and goat's milk and honeybees and honey production. There's this push to centralize everything, which is bad for national security. It's bad for food security. It's bad for America. Because think about it. What if there's a problem with a centralized food system? What if there's a fuel shortage? What if there's an EMP attack that takes down the power grid? You need food to be decentralized across urban and rural areas to have a strong nation. That's what Russia does. That's what Cuba does. You know, it's funny that the communist nations kind of get this idea of food decentralization. But America has declared a war, essentially, on backyard farmers and gardeners. And even gardeners like Julie Bass, also from Michigan, she was threatened with jail time for growing vegetables in a garden in her own front yard. Threatened with jail. It's extraordinary.
Mike, where are the legislators? Why are the legislators jumping on these laws and criminalizing gardeners and homesteaders? Who are the lobbying forces here specifically?
Well, big industry, big ag, the agricultural giants. I don't have to name names. You know who they are. The big seed companies, the big meat producing companies, just the big food supply companies that really dominate the entire landscape of food in America. They're the ones who apply the pressure, and they make billions of dollars a year. They can certainly spend money on lobbyists to force this further centralization or a monopolization, you might say, of the food supply. And again, who loses in this is the American people.
What about exotic pets? Could this law affect household animals as well?
Well, I don't think so. It's specifically written to cover backyard farming type of operations, livestock, chickens, goats, even cattle, that kind of thing. I don't think it applies to family pets, but you never know how they're going to misappropriate the language to do whatever they want. They could say it means something else. You never know.
Now, you mentioned honeybees. Could the local ban on honeybees compound the problem of pollinating across a large swath of property where bees are needed to continue the life cycle of plants?
Absolutely. Right now, we are suffering a honeybee pollinator collapse in North America, where over the last couple of winters, about 1/3 of the honeybee populations were lost. They died. We are really on the verge of a true crisis in terms of the loss of pollinators, and it is these pollinators that provide indirectly 1/3 of all the food that you eat when you sit down for lunch or dinner. 1/3 of that food comes from pollinators, or the plants that are pollinated by pollinators, to be more specific. So to destroy this opportunity for Americans to have honeybees, which are valuable pollinators, is to really destroy the food supply viability. And so it's a very short-sighted decision. It's anti-American, it's anti-freedom, it's anti-farming. It's a disaster. And let's hope it can be reversed.
Mike, what can private individuals and families do to combat these types of laws and simply ensure that they have food for their family and have a healthy food supply?
Well, number one is to practice backyard gardening and farming. So exercise your rights. Grow some of your own food, at least 10% of your diet, if not more. So practice this. Use heirloom seeds and practice seed saving. And have some backyard chickens. I have backyard chickens. We raise our own eggs, and they're the best eggs you'll ever find because they're free-range chickens. So exercise your rights and resist these attempts to oppress families and American values and food production, self-reliant living. So sometimes you got to go down to City Hall. You got to raise a stink about it. You got to protest. But these are God-given rights that I believe should never be allowed to be stripped from any American. The right to pursue happiness encompasses the right to farm and grow your own food. So it's really the fabric of our nation.